Today we are filming and talking about some serious shit. With this shit, he's the king of every shit that's ever been made.
That's a lot of shit.
So you are what I consider a very prolific filmmaker.
That is one thing you can say. It wasn't until I think about 10 years ago, in the middle of the Innocent Saga, I saw an article about us, and they said the word prolific, and that's when I actually had to go to the dictionary and find out what prolific meant. And that was my exposure to the word prolific.
And now, what do you think?
I agree. It's there's a 40 feature films,
Yes.
and then countless other things. Yes, I would say I'm probably one of the most prolific filmmakers out there. Now, I do understand that there is a difference between prolific and good. You know, there's a sacrifice in quality that comes with that. But at the same time, I learned through every single one of those projects, and I wouldn't give up any of them. You know, I may do things a little differently if I had to do it all over again, but having that many under my belt, every single one of them has something that I'm incredibly proud of in it.
So sometimes it is quantity over quality, but then at the end of the day, the quality, you know, you can look at something from every single one that did go right. Let's talk about what went wrong. So, well, actually, people may not know who we are.
That would be a good.
But I understand. Shameless plug. Check out this lovely book, now available online. And I understand that there's a little bit about me in this. So tell people who we are and how we got connected.
I mentioned you a little bit in the book.
So I am Nikki Young, and I have had the pleasure of working with you as an on-screen talent and then helping behind the scenes as well.
You've helped incredibly behind the scenes. I have a lot of friendships and professional relationships with a lot of actors because of you, because you were able to hook me up with other talent. Say this person would be great for this role.
I love showcasing people and connecting people. I live for that and letting them, explore new opportunities in their world of film, because it's just so much fun. Okay, yes. So we tell me about this meeting.
Well, it was I mentioned the first time we ever met in there, and we were at a San Antonio schmoozer. And what I remember, and you had actually reminded me of this just a few months ago, when I described myself as who I am and what I do, and I'm just a guy with a camera telling stories,
which I love so much.
And since you reminded me of that sort of spawned the direction of this entire series, because I realized that yes, whether you want to say that I accepted it or whatever, that's who I am. And I am just a guy with some cameras. Now, over the years, the cameras have gotten better, higher quality.
But let me say something about that, because you can have the highest quality equipment and still shoot.
Yes,
or you can have and shoot brilliance.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we're trying to get across in this series, especially. And one of the ones that I did recently that I'm sure upset a lot of people was sort of my reply to the haters. Mm-hmm. And the people that always said, well, why didn't you just save up and wait till you had all those big budgets before you started making movies? Because when I got that big budget, I wouldn't have a clue as to what to do.
Got to keep practicing.
So, for the longest time, I considered Ponderous Productions was practice. That was really where we were figuring things out, learning what we were doing. And yeah, there's going to be moments where there's just, a lot of crap in something, or bad acting, or bad shooting, or whatever. But you need to make those mistakes to learn. And one of the things that people were talking about, people like Robert Rodriguez, very young, got to start, making Hollywood films right out of the gate.
Yep.
But you also have to understand, yeah, he's there. He's 22, 23, 24, whatever. But he's surrounded by people who have been doing their craft for decades. Mm-hmm. The lighting guys, the grips, the best boys. All those people were there to help him see his vision. With us, it's me with a camera, and I
Telling
don't have
stories.
those. Yeah, telling those stories.
Whatever that camera is.
Exactly.
Well, I have to say, so this show is called What Went Wrong. And as big of a fan, and we are friends, I am also a Virgo, which means I'm pretty particular about things, and I will have that eagle eye and I will pick things apart. Sometimes unnecessarily, sometimes to my own frustration.
Well, that's what we're here for. We pick our stuff apart.
We pick our stuff apart.
We made the mistakes, so you don't have to.
So you tell stories. We've mentioned this. You are a history buff. One of the first projects that we got to work on together was Bass Reeves.
Yes.
As far as the fact that I was behind the scenes. So, can we talk a little bit about what went wrong a little bit on that one?
Yeah. First of all, yeah, it seems like we worked so much more.
I think
on that
we did, but that one is most prevalent to me because I think, you know what it was? You and I had worked together, but that was the first time I brought my company and my team involved. Okay. Does that make sense? Was
it? Okay, yes. Okay.
Because then we had PR.
Yeah, because I was thinking about VOSOT, how you helped you helped us hook up with other production companies and things like that. But yeah, you're right. Bass Reeves was the first time that I said, okay, we're going to publicize this. We're going to really do the marketing thing right.
So I had my team now involved in all different aspects. And so, can we talk about what went wrong on some of those things?
Yeah, I would say, and again, when we talk about the mistakes, we're not trying to make excuses. We're just trying to say what went wrong, so that
And I'm a fan of your work, and so by all means, this is not a criticism.
Oh yeah, no,
it's but not. Looking at that project. I would love if you had the opportunity to redo it. And
here, this will probably surprise you. Okay. This doesn't get mentioned much. We kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier in one of ours, but the movie that you see, the Bass Reeves that came out, was never supposed to be seen.
Do tell.
This was when I was looking for a Western to do.
Yes.
I wanted to do something that had never been told before. And that's when I stumbled across Bass Reeves. Now I found out in talking with a buddy of mine, Trey Bear, that he had actually told me about Bass Reeves many years before, and he wanted to do something on it, and it just sort of went in one ear out the other, or faded from my memory. But eventually I picked it back up and saw Bass Reeves, and I started reading more about him. And I said, this is a movie that I want to do, but I want to do this right.
Okay.
But I want to be able to take something to an investor and say, blam, look what we did for $4,000 or $5,000. And now please give us $100,000, $200,000, $250,000 so that we can do this the right way. So when we went into Bass Reeves, that version of it, it was supposed to be a demo reel. It was supposed to be this feature that we could show.
Proof of concept?
Proof of concept.
Okay.
So that we could take to investors and show and say, this is what we want to do. Otherwise, because there are moments in there where, like one of the things that still bothers me to this day are one of our actors' glasses.
Yes.
Very, very modern day. And I had said at one point, hey, can you take the glasses off? He's like, I'm blind as a bat without it. I can't ride a horse with it. And if I had to go over again, knew what was going to happen with it, I would have said, okay, you're just going to have to be blind in this scene.
Or you get something that can be an assistance for that.
Yeah.
Contacts. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or period piece, something, an accessory that is from that period that can help,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
So at that moment in time, it's like, okay, and I realized, okay, well, this is just our proof of concept. This is just our demo, so it'll be fine. I'll deal with it. So there will be little moments like that, and then there was also the idea of us being not as technically advanced as we had hoped. At that time, we weren't as well versed in After Effects and a lot of the things that you use to hide things with. So I would see a deer feeder in the back, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's okay. I'll be able to fix that when I get After Effects, and I'll be able to do all the
I'll
fancy
fix it
work
in post.
Fix it in post." So it was a lot of that. It'd be a wire that I'd be like, "Okay, well, I'll just take out the telephone pole later, in post or what have you." And then when we got into post, we didn't have the money for After Effects, and we didn't have everything that we wanted. I was still able to remove some. There's a lot of stuff that was removed. A lot of telephone wires and little things here and there. that screamed 20th century. But others, I just didn't have the technology to do that I thought I would have on set. And then in the end, we just put up the trailer. And if I hadn't put up that trailer, it wouldn't have gone anywhere, because we put up the trailer, and within a week we were getting calls. We want to, from distributors. We want to buy this. And at that point, it was a decision that the executive producer and I made, that okay, these people are offering us money. This means we'll be able to pay those deferments to our actors. So that was the primary reason that we said, okay, we want to make sure that the actors are paid and and everything. So we made the decision, okay, sell it. We're getting the offer. We will make sure that the actors have the money in their pocket. So that was that decision. So at that point, it was like, okay, well, we're I guess we're done with Bass Reeves. I guess this is our version of Bass Reeves is going to go out. And then it never went out because the distributor never did anything with it. They took it and they shelved it.
So for those people that don't know what shelving means, can you explain that?
Shelving is basically you'll buy a film and then put it on a shelf, and it'll never see the light of day, or it'll come out later. There was a lot of films with back in the mid '80s with a company called Orion. They shelved a lot of films. I think RoboCop may have been one of the ones that they shelved for a time, because they didn't have the marketing budget, or something happened that they felt, well, this isn't the time for it. When Columbine happened, there were a lot of films that were shelved, that were about to be released, but they shelved them because of the content, and say, well, we need to postpone this for a while.
I know that in the 80s, shelving actors was a very normal practice, but it was not spoke about. But actors would get signed with William Morris or whatever, and really they were similar to another talent that they were investing in, so they just did it so that wouldn't take away from.
Yeah, because you have to. When people get into film, they're doing it for the art. They're doing it for the
craft.
The craft, and they don't realize that Hollywood is a business.
Show business.
And
art and science.
Yeah, yeah, and every time art and business come head to head, business will win every time.
Yes, at the end of the day, the bottom line, it is a business, and the craft is certainly important, and then the science behind making the magic happen. It's like 3 different levels, right? So you had mentioned Columbine. So in the book you talked about how when we first met, it was at a networking event. I was actually working to coordinate that event and putting some prolific folks in the room together who were making film happen, and actually not just talking about it, but actually walking the walk. And you being one of those individuals, I had to do some background information and find out more about the body of work that you were committing to, and making sure that San Antonio was the main reason that you were making magic happen in San Antonio. But this project actually started back in Colorado, and a personal connection to Columbine, a short film based on real life events that you had a personal connection to. Would you like to share about that?
That's going to be a film called Too Young to Kiss. Now, I got the title from the same group that did a film called, or did a song called "This Is Ponderous" back when I was in high school. Back in the 2000, late 90s, they came out with a song called Zen Lullaby, and there was a line about classroom shootings, and there was a line in there, "Too Young to Kiss," and that's that. So I thought that was a perfect title for it. Yeah, it'll start with the I guess the phrase, "He was in the library." I had just finished shooting, or was in the middle of shooting a film called Queen of Hearts, and it was one of those moments where I was like, "This is going to be the most violent film I've ever made." Shootouts, I was still in my John Woo phase. Shootouts, and I the night before I had shot a scene that was supposed to be takes place in a party. A guy comes down, he just kills everybody, and he was the good guy, and. So we finished shooting the scene, and I went up, shut down for the night, and then the next morning I get up and somebody's watching TV, and there's something about Columbine High School. So there was there was a shooting at Columbine High School, and at that time it sounded like somebody walked on, fired a gun in the air, and then ran away or something. That's all we kind of knew at that point. And then it started getting a little more serious. So I called my dad and I said, "Dad, there's a high school here. There's a shooting, and I think it's the one that Daniel goes to. So you may want to call Tom and see what it's up. He said, okay, well, because my mother was in Pennsylvania visiting family, I think. So I wasn't calling her, so I called my dad and had the conversation with him. And a couple of hours later, I get a call, and I pick up the phone. It's my dad. He says he was in the library, and by that time we knew everything that had transpired. Well, that sort of blew me away, and that put me into a sort of, I don't want to say tailspin, but definitely a very contemplative period of my life where here I was just making these violent films, and I had to start throwing the idea into my head, analyzing questioning my films is, hey, do I hold responsibility here? Are my films or violent films and video games and all that? That's when things really started to come to really be debated. And my father became an anti-gun advocate.
Your father?
My uncle.
Uncle.
Daniel's
okay.
father. And I remember in the late 90s, there was a time he was at the White House speaking, and he was giving a speech, and he went on a tirade about violence in films. And at one moment, he looks in the camera and he's talking about, this is not entertainment. This is not art, and he looks at the camera, and it felt like he was looking directly at me and saying, this is not entertainment. So I didn't make films for 2 or 3 years because I had to look into that, and I had to find peace with what did my films what was the truth. So there was a lot of my own personal research, reading academic papers, journals, figuring it out myself, and time again, it kept coming back to, no, it didn't. That was not responsible. Academic journals saying no, saying that video games are actually are cathartic. So it was just one piece of research after another that kept on saying, no, you're not responsible for this. Your films aren't responsible for this, and you can't mix correlation with causation. Yeah, if it's a violent video game, violent people are going to be drawn to it. It doesn't make those people violent. So it was 2 to 3 years of just questioning that I finally came out the other side going, okay, I'm not responsible for this. My films aren't making people go out and do this, which is why, as a matter of fact, little side note, there was another filmmaker here in town that, without my permission, used footage from Innocent Saga in one of his films that his serial killer was watching to motivate him to go out and kill. When I caught wind of that, I put an end to that. I said, if you would have come to me and asked me, that's great, but I had to get and say, no, you're saying that my films are responsible for somebody going out and being a serial killer. No, I won't stand for that. So a little bit of side note on that. But it was a friend of mine, Tom Weinbrecht, who's no longer with us. He saw me going through this and not making films and how it was affecting me. And he said, Brett, you've got to sit down and write. You don't have to make a movie. At least write a script about this. So I wrote this movie about a classroom shooter, and it wasn't involved in the classroom. We didn't see the classroom. It was all the aftermath. It all took place in one room, and it was the shooter talking to a defense attorney, and it was the defense attorney trying to decide whether he was going to take the case or not. So it was getting inside the shooter's head and all of his motivations, and it was an internal debate with the anti-gun establishment in my head, countering all of their points, basically learning what my stance was on this through my own research, through the science, and through personal experience, and wrote that out. And I was about to decide to shoot it when Tom passed away. So he was not able to be a part of it. But he was the reason that I got back into filmmaking and decided that this is something that I needed to do. So in many ways I learned that film is also very therapeutic and can help you get through those tough times. And ever since then, I've used film through breakups, through well, I was never bankrupt, but through hard financial times and things like that. Well, I'm never bankrupt because I never put any money in my movies. through through all those hard times, I channeled that energy into my scripts, and you can tell where I am in my life through my scripts. Like one of my films, Not So Sane Man's Guide to the Multiverse, going through some very difficult relationship times, and it's one of the most darkest things I've ever written. Still funny, but very dark. So because I was in a dark place, and if I didn't have that outlet to make those. To allow to be able to express myself with that darkness inside of me, that darkness could have been expressed elsewhere. So.
And that's why I say that's what went right. So it was a way for you to get through that, your family to get through that difficult time, for you to come to a realization of your own ideals and the type of films that you want to tell.
Discover who I was.
Exactly. And so that begs the question then, what were you thinking when you did Vosot? What world was that in, So for those that don't know, I happen to be in Vosot, shameless plug.
One of the best performers in that, and still one of those that I want to get you and Taylor into a sequel on. That's the
more
Night
Maggie,
Side.
more Lenny.
Yeah, Vosot 2, Night Side. It was my...
That should be a hashtag, more Maggie Tyler. Just kidding.
We'll get it started.
Okay.
I wrote that, or I started to write that in 2000 when I had my first news job, and I just saw the crazy insanity that went on behind the scenes, and there was just so many funny stories behind that I said, I gotta make a movie about this. So I wrote it, and I left the news and wasn't in the news for the longest time, and then in 2005, 2006. Where I met Bradley Bates, I was in the commercial production team of WB, the WB affiliate in Corpus Christi. So being on a different aspect of a TV station, I added a little bit of story to that. So there's the Brett and Brad part of that story, which are my WB years. And then there's the news side of the story, which started in 2000, but then when I worked at a TV affiliate as a news photographer in Corpus Christi from 2010 to 2011, I was able to write more about things that had happened and the way news is actually told. And a lot of the stuff that people don't know goes on behind the scenes, and how, I'll be upfront, how biased it really is. And that people put so much faith and so much dignity and respect into the people that are on that news screen, on your TV screen at night. I needed to show that these are the same people that you work with. That whether, if you're an accountant or a lawyer, whatever, everybody has, ask anybody and they'll say they work with a bunch of idiots. And I needed to show through this movie that the news industry is the exact same. There are people who know what they're doing. There are people who are good at their job. But just like any other job, whether it's film, whether it's being a lawyer, whether it's being sanitation, every job has idiots in it. And that was my hope, that people would understand not to fully give your heart and soul over to the news, that the people who are writing that are just as idiotic as the people that you work with.
Except for Maggie Tyler.
Maggie Tyler was a whole nother creature.
Please don't make me work with Lenny. He's horrible.
I'm right here,
I know you are, numbnuts. I'm not blind.
Well, let's talk about what went wrong in that movie. Do you? Yeah. You want to talk about that?
We can talk about.
Okay, so let's talk about what went wrong in that movie. Do you think, because the subject matter of the film is the behind the scenes of the news industry, that many people would not understand or relate to it, that may have been a wrong?
No, I don't believe that. From a production standpoint, I don't think there's much wrong with Vosot. I think it's one of the best films I've ever done. I think it's shot beautifully. I think every frame is terrific. I think that if I were to say anything wrong about it from a filmmaking standpoint, I would say it's not plot driven. I don't feel that, and I'm one of those that doesn't believe that
news.
Exactly. I didn't go into this to have a plot. It was an educational film in many ways. And there are plenty of films, great films out there that literally don't have a plot.
A lot of people have told me it's a mockumentary.
Yeah, with the way the Bryce
and
character
these are my
talks to the
news
camera.
friends that are saying this. My news friends are like, Man, I love those songs. It's like a mockumentary. It's great. It's a
I've had-
satire.
yeah. I've had so many people say, if you want to be a journalist student, just watch this movie. You've saved $20,000 tuition. So I would say, from a filmmaking standpoint, maybe it could have had a little bit more of a plot to it. Followed Bryce and have a goal and the ups and downs. But that wasn't the point of the film. And I still think it's perfectly timed where it doesn't get boring. It does go from one place to another. And I think maybe you step away from it going, I don't know exactly what I just watched. I liked it, but I don't know what exactly I watched.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about on the what went wrong. Do you think that's the impression that people are going to be left with,
No, I think it's, I think it is one of those moments where people are a little bit like, what was that? But I don't think they're not going to not enjoy it. I think they're going to enjoy it. It's just a little different than most films that you would see. But yeah, I think mockumentary, if they go into it knowing it's a mockumentary, it like something like This Is Spinal Tap.
Yes.
That again, not much plot. It wasn't, it was sort of one thing to another. And it was what it was supposed to be, and that was a day in the life of a news photographer. So I wouldn't say that that's where, from a production standpoint, I would say that's one of the most proudest films that I've ever, of mine.
That's because Maggie
Because of the talent, yes, because of the talent that was involved.
Just kidding.
No, you're absolutely right. I had a great team of actors to work with. I mean, there wasn't, I would say, there's usually always at least one stinker in my movies. It's hard to find one in Vosat. It's just, all the performances are stellar, from beginning to end.
What would you say if all of your projects? So you mentioned Vosat, your most proud, which is the one you're like, I just put that one away.
Serial Rabbit, the first Serial Rabbit is probably one, which is why it still hasn't seen the light of day.
Okay. What went wrong there?
I lost a bet, and that's why I had to make the movie. So there wasn't a whole lot of, we didn't take it seriously. I wrote it in one night. It was 40 pages. And I told Brad we had 3 to 5 days to shoot it. And it was his sort of passion project. And I had no idea it would turn into what it did. So we are right now going back and I've got my new staff. I've got a couple people re-editing some old films, and Serial Rabbit is one of them, so it will actually come out. Serial Rabbit, one of the things, there was a lot of language in it that I didn't write, that some of our actors put into it, and at the time I was just like, let them say whatever they want to say. And now it's like, no, it's got to go. So that's what we're doing on that.
David Mamet, everything that he writes is a purpose and a motivation for that kind of language, right? So it has to have a reason and a motivation, not just blatant.
Yeah. It's hard for me to say that there was anything that was just a complete and utter mistake or anything like that, or that I regret most. It would be how I made them that I wish I regretted, because even the worst film that I've ever made would be Cartel Killers, because we didn't even have lights on that film.
What went wrong?
Yes, you got to have lights to make a movie.
I mean, technically speaking, people will be able to see the movie. Then yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean that was always. I joke about this to this day that lighting was one of the last things that I figured out, because people would say, Brett, how's the lighting? I said, can you see the actors? Yes, action. And that was the way I handled lights. But Cartel Killers it was so bad. But again, the
so
story
bad that
is
it's
there.
So good.
No,
Just
this
so
is just
bad.
one of those things that
It's just
bad. That we almost didn't sell it. They wanted it, but we chose, we don't want to sell this. But then they said $10,000. All right, it's $10,000. You want to pay $10,000 for this? It's yours. So I would love to reshoot it, just like any of my films. I would love to reshoot those films, and that's sort of what I've done. And Second to Last Worst Day of My Life, we shot originally in 2007, and then again in 2011 when we had we were now HD, and I have love for both of those films, but quality wise, the remake is so much better. So I can't really say that
But at what point do you stop remaking your films, though?
I don't. When I'm satisfied with them, and there comes a time where I'm satisfied, and I can. Normally, I would say, what you could argue with me about, you'll never be satisfied.
Right.
Well, now I know that I am, because After the Day was shot in 2007, and we remade that just recent with Red Days, and I'm completely satisfied with Red Days. I love Red Days. I couldn't make After the Day any better. That one's off my table. I can say no. And then there are films that I'm not going to remake because I'm like, oh, they don't need to be remade. That one doesn't need to be remade. Not because it doesn't deserve an overhaul or could use an overhaul. It's just like, well, I told that story, I'm done. But there are films like Second to Last Worst Day or Tag, which I have an emotional investment in that I want to see done right, that will get remade.
So we kind of jumped all over the place. Do people know anything about your background?
It depends on what background you're talking about. What have you heard?
One of the things that I think set the stage for you in your storytelling world is you and I have a mutual appreciation of comedy in the 80s, such as Moonlighting.
I was going to mention that, yeah.
Talk about your influence from there.
Well, the more was it? I guess maybe just 5 or 6 years ago, I got the old Moonlighting DVDs out and watched them, and I can watch it and see how influential those films were. My love of the 40s is from Moonlighting and their 1940s episode that they did. That introduced me to Casablanca, to The Big Sleep, all those 40 films, because I saw those films, the Dream Sequence Always Rings Twice episode of Moonlighting, and fell in love with the 40s.
Do you know my favorite episode?
Atomic Shakespeare.
Man, he knows me so well. Fine.
And which is also influential on me because Honor Slate for next year is a Shakespearean musical.
It's my favorite episode. It's so brilliant.
Oh,
so great.
It won me over. I mean, that's probably that in the dream sequence.
Can I tell you something? So this is the first time I'm sharing this with you. So when I got the part of Maggie Tyler, I've always wanted to be in the news industry, and I've not had the opportunity to have as much success as Maggie has had. But when I was processing the background of her character, there are certain news reporters that I put together, but some of her reactions are Sybil Shepherd Moonlighting.
And Tammy the Shrew.
And that specific episode, and how, or there's a scene in Vosat where Mark Durat and I are interacting in the war room, and some of her reactions is, and the way that we're talking, I got from Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis's kind
that
of
banter. Do
they like it? Do they not like it? Do they like it? Not like each other?
I'm sorry. I don't do nuts.
I do.
You are such a pig.
There's a moment where I'm with Lenny and I'm taking his head down to shoot the dead cat. And I did that in a way that was just frustrating with the way that she would do that, the way Maddie would do that. And then there's a scene where I'm at the end of the day and I'm just overwhelmed and exhausted. I'm like, I got to get to national. I got to get to network. I got to get to network. And I'm just processing, like, can I get through another day of this crap? And I remember there's that tender moment, those emotional moments that Maddie had. And so those were my 3 things I wanted to share with you that were my homage for you for Moonlighting. Whether or not anyone picked up on it, that was my greeting card for you.
Well, it's funny how things like that bring people together, because I think with even though we don't call back and have references to Moonlighting all the time, I think that because we were both such Moonlighting fans,
yes,
it created an instant karma before we even knew that we were both Moonlighting fans. It just evolved us into those types of people that love that sense of humor and
so
evolved
much.
who we were. So, yeah, if it weren't for Moonlighting, I don't think probably we would have the relationship that we have today.
That's true. All right, well, Brett, everyone is so lucky when they get the chance to work with you, whether or not it went right or it went wrong. One of the things I want people to know is just because something went wrong doesn't mean you can't learn from it. And that's what this series is about. So please subscribe right here. Click, subscribe, get the notifications so that you can watch this series, follow this series, learn what went wrong so that you can make it right.
Hi, I'm Brett Mauser, and I wrote the book on how to make a movie with no money. And here it is. See, it's got pictures and everything. So head on over to our website, notsosane.com, and get your digital or paperback copy today.